Alright, so I want to start this video off by saying that I was a huge fan of Final Fantasy VII Remake. I wasn't exactly crazy about Final Fantasy 15, but I did not go into this game with the expectations that it be one or the other. I did not go into the game with the expectations that it be turn-based or any other preconceived notions. I went in expecting whatever the devs wanted to give me. With all that out of the way, let's get into it. I'm going to start with the story, which is a bit of a wild ride. It dabbles heavily in political, backstabby melodrama, which I can fully get behind. I loved what Final Fantasy Tactics did. I like Tactics Ogre, a game that was recently re-released. I dig the style of this kind of story. I think right off the bat, though, my biggest complaint is probably pacing, but this is a point that I'll come back to in a little bit, so just keep that in mind for now. However, for the story itself, some of these things are not the greatest thing to listen to. The lines can feel like they're dragging on, and in these moments, the story feels like it's overstaying its welcome, and I just detach because I'm being pulled out of the experience, rather than leaning forward into that gamer stance. I think this comes off the way it does because a lot of these characters just are not interesting. I can honestly say out of all the cast, and without giving any spoilers, there's about 6, maybe 7 or 8 characters that actually really had me wanting to get to know everything about them. Jill, Benedicta, obviously Cid, everybody loves Cid. Clive, he's the main character, so naturally you're going to get a feel for him. And then there's Annabella, who actually might be my favorite character in the game. As for the last person, I'm not going to bring them up into question as they're a little bit further into the story, but for me, when these characters weren't on the screen or taking up part of the conversation, I just didn't seem to care all that much. I think another thing that really bothered me is that everyone is already established in the world. A lot of these characters don't get a flashback as to who they were, who they are, what their friend group looks like, how they got into the positions that they were. They just don't seem to grow, so we as a player don't really know who they are, and it just kind of feels bad. I think another knock against the story for me is that a lot of these characters die off in very strange and weird ways. A lot of ways which can be prevented, such as, a character being able to heal, all of a sudden they can't heal, or a character that could have seen something happen just kind of stood there for no reason, or maybe Clive being in a position where he could stretch his arm out and help somebody, but for some reason he doesn't, even though he has all these crazy powers that, would allow him to do such things. And so it takes away from the player's experience when a character that they're potentially going to be interested in, they know that 5 hours from now may not exist in the story at all. I know I really just went at the story's throat, but overall, the story is not horrible. It's not even bad. I actually quite enjoy it when it allows me to lose myself in it. There are certainly parts I enjoy and some things that I didn't. I am of the mindset that it has extreme highs, and you get these amazing cutscenes with the music swelling and all these particles on the screen. Clive is just going nuts, and all this stuff is handled perfectly. I cannot stress that enough. In these moments, this game is an 11 out of 10. But that's ultimately where my main criticism falls. So now I want to get into the point that I brought up earlier, which was pacing. The game drags on a lot of the time. You'll go from a sick cutscene where your adrenaline is boiling, then it just fades to black, and you kind of just walk around for an hour or two. The boss fights are genuinely a blast, so after some of these fights, the normal enemies just make the game feel like a hack and slash where everyone has way too much health. The sad part is, these characters are downright stunning, so in these moments, it just really feels bad because you just want to see more of the story. Speaking of fade to black, I hope you love seeing that because it's the only transition this game will ever use. This may sound like I'm going back on what I said. I do like this story, but it's just baffling how in 2023 on the PS5, the next generation of Final Fantasy game comes out and they just really drop the ball in this area. I'm genuinely disappointed at how Yoshi P and his team, the people who turned around Final Fantasy XIV and made it what it is today, can't seem to write a clean, succinct story. There's a Spider-Verse where this game, Final Fantasy XVI, is about 20 hours in length, has no filler, all gas, no breaks, till the moments the credits roll. But we didn't get that. In an age where God of War Ragnarok exists and you can play the entire game in a single take without the game cutting from your character, we are left as Final Fantasy players waiting on the fade to black transition so that way we can go to the next cutscene or talk to the next character for the next little quest to then just fade to black. And so for my last point, I think something that I really need to bring up is that there is a lot, and I mean a lot, of plot convenience, especially in the early game. A certain special person just happens to be in a certain special place for you to get a certain special weird item that doesn't make any sense. There's a scene super early into the game where Clive sees a person he knows, a person that has been on the screen plenty of times, and you as a player will know, but yet he has no idea who she is. So there's this weird disconnect between player in game and also player in character, because Clive should know who this person is. You know who this person is, and yet he's standing here clueless. I noticed it way too much in earlier parts of the story, but as the game continues, it certainly happens, but not at the same pace that it does in the earlier game. Future Omni here, and I just wanted to add something extra after sleeping on it. This could be maybe a slight spoiler, so feel free to skip ahead to the timestamps, but I feel like I needed to add this. The game is just too damn long. My playthrough was 30 hours, which for me is just too much. Come the 70% mark, I just wanted it to be over. The repetition of the corridor, fight, corridor, mini-boss, corridor, fight, corridor, hall, boss, cutscene, gameplay loop that seems almost in place just to kind of fuel this arcade mode that they have in the game. It really just kind of wore me down, and it actually ended up changing my disposition on the story as a whole, because at a point, I kind of am looking forward to just the battles now, and I'm not looking forward to the story because I'm just not interested. I've already tuned out. Also, what happened to playing through Clive's life as advertised? Here we just kind of play through snippets of him as a teenager, then in his mid-20s, and then 85% of the game is as an adult, which I feel like they could have used these earlier moments to really build these other characters and make me care, so in later stages of the game, they have more of an impact, but they didn't do that, and for me, these characters, outside of the few that I mentioned, never really resonated with me, making the end of the game kind of lifeless and feeling almost unearned. With all that out of the way, let's move on to something I assume that everyone wants to talk about, and that is combat. I think this is where I was having the most fun, but even with that said, it's hard to explain. Now, I did not come into this game with the expectation that it be turn-based or even the same system that we saw in Final Fantasy VII Remake, but it's almost as if this system was created back in 2005. I've played Final Fantasy 15, and I've played Final Fantasy VII Remake, which I think are probably the closest comparisons, but this system feels somewhat shallow when you look at its contemporaries. The combat of Devil May Cry is fluid. The basic sword chain has 20 different ways to do it, from holding the attack to give it a charge, waiting a second to get a different chain, and there's all kinds of things that you can do from there. In this game, you hit square 4 times and you're able to link magic attacks and of course cancel into special attacks. When you want to mix it up, you'll be relying on your icon abilities, which is certainly fine and they feel amazing, but when it comes to the depth of combat, it feels somewhat surface level. You press square a few times, you do an icon ability, you throw a charged magic attack, rinse and repeat. The icon abilities can link into each other, and you can have 3 abilities per icon and 3 icons per setup. Each icon does have a unique move that cannot be changed, however. Most of the time, you'll fly through your abilities after staggering an enemy, and because the skills are cooldown based, you'll have to just wait and swing your sword 4 hits at a time, and it just feels terrible. But when compared to the flashy, damaging moves you could be doing, it's not exactly what the player wants. I think a good comparison is that in Final Fantasy VII Remake, the Buster Sword has this impact on hits that gives the sword weight. It gives Cloud this feeling of strength with each swing, so even when you're not doing your abilities, you still feel like you're doing damage. When compared to your attack here, you feel weak. To me, it feels like I'm being punished. On the flip side though, again in Final Fantasy VII Remake, there was an ATB gauge that filled with each attack. So albeit not complete action based all the time, there was a sense of control with how you would spend your skills, as well as the knowledge that they'll be back sooner rather than later. Here though, some of the cooldowns in my opinion are way too long. I can understand why though. These are 90% of your power. There's a wind-based icon skill that does absolutely insane stagger damage. If this ability was used in the same environment as the ATB gauge, I could see this being broken for the player, which is another argument entirely as to how strong the player should feel in a single-player game. But regardless, I think the game would be better off with shorter cooldowns, or a way to enhance skills beyond just simply mastering and upgrading them, which you can do slightly with some accessories, but even then, it never feels like enough. The system for getting your abilities isn't all that impressive for a newer generation mainline Final Fantasy game. It's okay, but I have some issues. You'll find out almost immediately that the only time you get new skills is after a big icon fight. You don't get skill points for level ups, you don't get a very interesting skill tree, you just get new abilities dropped on you after beating a boss. This current implementation almost makes you feel like the leveling system is kind of pointless. If all you're ever going to get is new exciting things after boss fights, items, weapons, and other upgrades included, then why actually go out into the world and fight anything interesting if you really just want to push on through the story so you can see the new cool abilities? When you do level, however, all you will gain from this is about 50 HP and 3 to all other stats. It's so bland that there isn't really a reason for the game to be making it such a big deal as it does. Every time you level up, the game will stop, a screen pops up, it's going to show all your stats increase, and then you just click cancel. It's not going to show you any new moves. It's not going to show you anything cool that you've gained or anything else. So really, there's nothing to see here. Ultimately, the combat is great, and it really starts to drive home this perspective that the creators of this game really just wanted two things to hit home. That was the story and the combat. These two things are both very, very good. I like the combat more than the story, but this feels like an amazing base for the next game. After this gets fleshed out and the next game drops, I could see this being a place where the system is at its absolute best. So for the final topic, I want to touch on RPG systems, and yes, I am going to talk about the RPG systems in a Final Fantasy game, or, well, lack thereof. Okay, so this is part of the review where I ultimately lose my fucking mind and want to know exactly who is responsible for these decisions. This is bad. Horrible. I cannot imagine a person working on a Final Fantasy game and thinking that this was something that needed to basically be cut from it entirely. Let me be straight up. There are no RPG elements here, zero to speak of, which is absolutely baffling. Everything from your weapons to your accessories are just basically stat sticks, and honestly speaking, you can beat the game without even having a single thing on. It would take you more time because you're doing less damage, yes, but I would guarantee it's absolutely possible. There isn't really any decision making to be had. There isn't a cool sword that makes you change your playstyle. There isn't an accessory that you freak out about because holy shit, you needed this for your build. You just equip a sword with some stats. You have a few accessories. You have some items you can use in combat, those being potions, high potions, elixirs, and some stat buffs, stuff for like your strength or your defense. And that's really about it. I could tell you accessories are cool, but 10% damage to X ability is about the only thing you're getting here. Maybe I can interest you in 3 seconds off ability. You would think that this coming from the creators of A Realm Reborn, there would be some genuine bangers in terms of items, but no, you'll get a lot of crafting materials, and I can see you scratching your head. Crafting materials, so then that's where all the cool items are, right, Omni? No, not at all. That's where you'll be wasting most of your time, in fact. You beat a few enemies, crafting materials. You fight a boss, crafting materials. You beat a mini-boss, more crafting materials. Finish a side quest, get crafting materials. Find a random chest out in the open, crafting materials. If there's one thing this game loves to give you, it's crafting materials. Other than that, you will not be getting anything else from boss fights. You will not be getting anything else from mini-bosses. You will not get anything from hunts. You will get crafting materials to then go back to the blacksmith to upgrade your weapon by 5, 10, 15 attack, maybe that. Same for the accessories, 5, 10, 15 defense. And then after that, it's see you next chapter. You're going to spend a lot of the early game walking up to the blacksmith and thinking, wait, I can't buy anything? And this was obviously intentional because, as I just stated, the only time you can upgrade your items or create new ones is after a boss fight. For the entirety of this game, you'll have an abundance of wolf teeth and bird feathers, and the swords you can craft from bosses isn't exactly interesting. So for example, early on, you'll get a sword called the Storm Cry. Whatever you're thinking in your brain right now, no, it doesn't do that. Fuck all is what it does. It just increases my damage by 10 points. It doesn't make my wind-based abilities stronger. It doesn't give me a second dash. It doesn't increase run speed. It doesn't do anything except look pretty in the sheath, for some reason hangs over the shoulder, and clips every time I pull it out or put it away. This is not what I would expect or have hoped for in a mainline Final Fantasy game in 2023. To me, in my opinion, this is the epitome of lifeless, bland design. There's nothing here. If you want to build an interesting Clive that is well versed in magic, no, you can't. The game will not allow it. My Clive is the same as yours with different attacks. You can't be a mage, you can't cast red magic, blue magic, there's no cure, there's no haste, there's nothing to change what one character can do from another outside of equipping 3 different icons. Which I'd like to stress that that's not inherently a bad thing. I just think that here it is poorly implemented. You are not allowed to build an interesting character. You are going to build the character that they want you to build, and that is it. There is no RPG in this game. It is an action-adventure game more than it is an RPG adventure game. Alright, so to close the video out, I just wanted to touch on a few loose ends that I didn't really felt fit anywhere. My first thing will be exploration. I just don't understand why this game has these big, sprawling, huge maps where you end up just kind of turning them into corridors because there's nothing interesting along the way. They never give you a reason to go off the beaten path. If you do, it's an area to set up for something later, like a hunt, or maybe some specific event that happens, but even then, the reward is never of anything of value. Next thing I want to touch on quickly is the party system. 2 characters will almost always be with you along your journey, and yet you can never do anything for them. You don't have any gambits like from Final Fantasy 12. You can't change any skills that they use or even the frequency in which they use said skills. So you have these weird moments in combat where you'll look over and you'll just see them holding a tub of popcorn, chilling, no pun intended, and it drives me absolutely mad that you can't outfit them. You can't give them accessories. You can't interact with them. I just can't help but imagine how much better this system would be if even for the 2 characters that you do have, albeit I wish there was more considering there's a ton of characters in this game, It would just be very, very nice to be able to give them extra weapons or see their stats or adjust their skills or do anything. But other than that, I mean, they're just kind of NPCs that follow you around for the story. Lastly, I want to bring up more of a nitpick than anything, but it's the world map. The map isn't inherently bad because of its existence. It's bad because how the game treats it. So when you finish a quest or a cutscene, sometimes you'll be brought to the map, only to be forced to click on a certain point. This isn't inherently bad, but the game does this all of the time. The game will bar you from exploring for periods of time, and it expects you to click on a certain place to go to a certain place so that way you can interact with whatever it wants you to interact with. Why not just have me in the location you need me to be in rather than having the game dump me out on the map? It wasn't something that bothered me at first, but over the course of my 30-hour playthrough, having to click X, hold X to travel, fade to black, pop up over and over and over and over again, it's just not fun. With that, we've come to the end of this Rambling Idiots video. To close it all out, I think that if you're looking for something that is beautiful to look at, you can turn your brain off, kick your feet up, and just lose yourself inside a great story while you cut down enemies and traverse the world, I think you might have found your game. If not, your game of the year. But if you're looking for a challenge, looking to find some interesting items, get lost inside a menu, and theory craft your next build before the boss fight, you may walk away from this installment disappointed and weary for the future. If you made it to the end of the video, I just want to say thank you. Huge shout outs. Uploading a video like this is kind of nerve-wracking for me to put my opinion out there like that, but time to shut the lights off, and I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.